On a cold February afternoon in 1999, 13-year-old Minerliz, Minnie, Soriano disappeared while walking home from school in the Bronx, New York. For days later, her body was found stuffed inside a trash bag, discarded in a building's dumpster just a few blocks from her home. For more than 2 decades, her family lived without answers, haunted by the silence, until a revolutionary DNA breakthrough in 2021 finally revealed the man responsible for her death. Before we continue, please hit the like button so more people can see this case, and subscribe to the channel with all notifications turned on, so you never miss a cold case investigation. And let us know in the comments where you are watching us from. Every interaction helps keep these stories alive. It was Wednesday, February 24, 1999. A typical school day in the Bronx. The February air still bit, but there was a sense of routine on the streets. The Mount Eden neighborhood was alive with the noise of the city, the squeal of buses, the echoing rumble of the elevated train in the distance, kids with backpacks rushing on the sidewalks, corner bodegas with open doors, and steam rising from the sewers. Amidst this familiar chaos was Minerliz Soriano. To everyone who knew her, she was simply Minnie. At 13, she was at that delicate cusp between childhood and adolescence. She was described by her teachers as a quiet and exceptionally kind girl. One of those kids who would volunteer to clean the chalkboard or help a classmate who had fallen behind. She had a shy smile and large brown eyes that seemed to observe everything with seriousness. Her family was everything to her. She dreamed of becoming a nurse, a reflection of her innate desire to care for others. That Wednesday afternoon, the bell rang at Intermediate School 135. Minnie collected her books, put on her coat, and stepped out into the cold air. She said goodbye to her friends, planning to walk the short distance back to her family's apartment. The journey was less than a mile, a path she had taken hundreds of times. It was a route flanked by brick buildings, family-run shops, and familiar faces. A path that should have been safe. But somewhere on that short route, Minnie never made it home. As the clock ticked past 4 p.m. and then 5 p.m., the worry in the Soriano apartment began to grow. Minnie was always on time. Her father, Luis, began to feel that cold knot of panic. First he called the school. They told him classes had ended on time. Then, he called the parents of Minnie's friends, one by one. The answer was always the same: "No, we saw her leave, she hasn't made it home?" As the sun began to set and the bustling energy of the Bronx gave way to the shadows of night, panic turned to terror. The Soriano family contacted the NYPD and filed a missing person report. Within hours, officers began canvassing the area. But it was a monumental task. They checked nearby parks, building stairwells, dark alleys. Neighborhood volunteers, hearing the news, joined the search, shouting her name into the darkness. Flyers with Minnie's photo began to appear, taped to lampposts, on bodega windows, and laundry room doors. The image of her smiling face stared out from the paper, a silent plea in a city of millions. But in a metropolis as vast, chaotic, and indifferent as New York, finding a missing girl was like searching for a single grain of sand on a crowded beach. The days passed. Friday, Saturday. Every phone call made the family's heart leap, only for it to be a false alarm. Hope began to crumble, replaced by unbearable anguish. And then, on Sunday, February 28th, a maintenance worker at a nearby apartment building made a grim discovery. It was a cold, gray Sunday morning. The maintenance worker at the apartment building on 2323 Walton Avenue was making his usual rounds. The building was a few blocks from Minnie's apartment, but in the density of the Bronx, it might as well have been another world. He headed to the basement area where the garbage dumpsters were kept, preparing to wheel them out to the curb. He lifted the heavy metal lid of a dumpster and was met by the usual scent of city trash. But something was out of place. He noticed a dark plastic garbage bag, large and heavy, that felt much heavier than it should. It seemed to have been forcefully wedged in among the other bags. Curiosity, or perhaps a sense of dread, made him pull it out. When he opened it, the smell that rushed out was overwhelming and unmistakable. It was not household garbage. It was the scent of death. Inside, he saw the small form of a body. The worker recoiled in horror and called 911. The NYPD arrived quickly and cordoned off the area. Residents, drawn by the sirens, began to gather silently on the sidewalks as detectives strung the yellow tape around the building. The scene was devastating. The girl was fully clothed, and although decomposition had begun, investigators could see she was small, barely a teenager. Dental records confirmed the identity within 24 hours. It was Minerliz Minnie Soriano. For her family, the confirmation shattered what little hope remained. Patty Soriano, her mother, collapsed upon hearing the news. The sound of her grief echoed down the hallway of their building. Neighbors wept openly on the stoops. Her teachers at school lit candles in front of the building where she was found, a small, makeshift shrine amidst the tragedy. The Bronx, a borough already accustomed to adversity and toughness, seemed to stop and mourn one of its own. Detectives from the Bronx Homicide Squad took over the case immediately. The scene at the dumpster offered few clues. The killer had disposed of her as if she were nothing. The medical examiner's report was clinical and brutal. It determined Minnie had been sexually assaulted and then strangled. The cause of death was asphyxiation. The ME estimated the time of death was between 24 and 36 hours after she went missing, meaning she was likely murdered late Thursday night or Friday morning. The investigation hit a brick wall. There were no signs of forced entry at her home. There were no clear witnesses who saw her with anyone suspicious after leaving school. And this was 1999. Surveillance cameras were scarce on residential streets. There was no CCTV footage to track down. Investigators interviewed dozens of people, family members, classmates, teachers, neighbors, and local shop owners. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she might have been lured by someone she knew and trusted. Others whispered about possible gang involvement. None of these rumors led anywhere. Crucial DNA was recovered from the scene, specifically from Minnie's clothing. This was the most significant breakthrough. But in 1999, forensic databases were limited. The genetic profile was uploaded to CODIS, the national DNA system, but it yielded no match. The killer was not in the system. And technologies like familial DNA searching were still science fiction. For months, detectives chased every lead they could find. They questioned registered sex offenders in the area. They followed up on anonymous tips. Each time, the results came back the same: no match. And slowly, like so many other cases in a city full of tragedies, the murder of Minerliz Soriano went cold. The file grew thick, but the answers remained miles away. As the 2000s began, life in the Bronx moved on. The city survived the Y2K scare, witnessed the horror of 9/11, and began to rebuild. But for the Soriano family, time seemed frozen in February 1999. Minnie's room remained untouched, a sanctuary of her interrupted life. Her posters of 90s pop artists were still on the walls. Her notebooks, with her teenage handwriting, were still on her desk. Her favorite stuffed animal was still on her bed. Stepping in there was like stepping back in time, a painful reminder of what they had lost. Every year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, the family held a small vigil. They lit candles, shared memories, and prayed. But the questions tormented them. Who could do such a cruel thing? Why Minnie? Was the killer still out there, walking the same streets as them? Behind the scenes, the NYPD did not entirely forget. Minnie's case was one of those that haunted detectives. Every few years, a new cold case detective would pull the file. They would review the notes, reread the interviews. As DNA technology advanced, they retested the evidence, hoping a new technique might reveal something. But nothing. The killer was a ghost. By 2010, more than a decade had passed. Minnie's parents were older now, their faces etched with a pain that never left. They had lost hope for justice, settling into the grim reality of no answers. It seemed the truth would never come to light. Then, in 2021, 22 years after the crime, technology finally caught up to the killer. The NYPD Cold Case Squad, armed with new tools, decided to re-examine the DNA found on Minerliz's clothing. This time, they weren't looking for a direct match. They were using a cutting-edge method known as familial DNA analysis. This process is genetic detective work. It doesn't just look for an exact match in codes, but searches for genetic similarities that might identify a suspect's relatives, a sibling, a cousin, a parent. They ran the DNA profile through New York State's familial DNA database. And this time, they got a hit. Not a match, but a lead. The results pointed to a strong family connection to a man named Joseph Martinez. Detectives looked up the name. Joseph Martinez, age 49, and still living in the Bronx. In fact, he lived incredibly close to where Minnie's body was found. He had never been on law enforcement's radar for this crime. He had no major violent criminal history, nor any obvious connection to the Soriano family. He was just a guy living his life in plain sight. Detectives began undercover surveillance. They needed his DNA to make a direct comparison. They followed Martinez, watching his routine. They collected items he discarded in public: cigarette butts, a water bottle, used tissues. Anything that might contain his DNA. They sent the samples to the lab for a confirmatory DNA test. When the lab tested the samples against the 1999 DNA profile found on Minnie's clothing, the result was undeniable. It was a perfect match. After 22 years of silence, dead ends, and heartache, they had the man responsible for the murder of Minerliz, Minnie, Soriano. On November 8, 2021, detectives moved in on Joseph Martinez. The 49-year-old was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. During questioning, he showed little emotion. He did not confess, but it did not matter. The forensic evidence left no room for doubt. Police believe Martinez, who was 27 at the time of the crime, encountered Minnie as she walked home. They believe he abducted her off the street, took her to a location, possibly his own apartment, assaulted and killed her, before disposing of her body in the dumpster near his building, a spot he knew well. When the news broke, the Bronx and much of New York City were stunned. The name Minerliz Soriano was back in the headlines after more than 2 decades of silence. At a press conference, Bronx District Attorney Darcel Clark spoke with solemnity. After 22 years, we can finally say her name and know that justice is being served. Minerliz Soriano was a child with her whole life ahead of her. That future was stolen from her, but we never stopped fighting for her. For the Soriano family, the news was a collision of relief and agony. Relief that they finally knew who. Agony that all the pain was brought back to the surface. "We prayed for this day," her uncle told reporters. "But now that it is here, the pain feels new all over again." As the case moved through the courts, prosecutors revealed that the original DNA had been meticulously preserved for over 2 decades, a testament to the diligence of the original 1999 investigators. That single piece of evidence became the key that finally unlocked the truth. Familial DNA technology, once controversial due to privacy concerns, had proven itself capable of solving cases previously thought impossible. The same techniques had identified killers in other landmark cases, from the Golden State Killer in California to dozens of cold cases across the country. In 2022, Joseph Martinez appeared in court, facing charges of second-degree murder. He was denied bail by the judge. During the proceedings, prosecutors detailed how the DNA evidence left no room for doubt. Minnie's family sat quietly in the courtroom, a 22-year journey that led them to this room, facing the man who took everything from them. Pictures of Minnie were shown on the screens. She was smiling in all of them, a 13-year-old girl, frozen in time. The Bronx community, after 22 years, finally had an answer. The man who took Minnie's life had been walking among them for decades, a ghost that no one saw. And though justice was delayed, it was not denied. The case of Minerliz Minnie Soriano is more than a story about tragedy. It is a story about perseverance, of investigators who refused to give up, of scientists who innovated, and of a family who never stopped believing that one day, the truth would come to light. It is also a reminder of how far forensic science has come, how a single, preserved DNA sample can bridge decades of time and bring justice long after hope has faded. Minnie's story resonates across time, reminding us that no case is truly cold, only waiting for the right moment, the right technology, and the right people to uncover what has been hidden. Tonight, as we remember Minerliz, We remember every child whose story has yet to be told, every unanswered question that still lingers in the silence. What are your thoughts on this case? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, but please keep them respectful of Minerliz and her family's memory. If you want to see more true crime investigations like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it so more people can know these stories, because sometimes, even the smallest detail can help bring justice after decades of silence.